Welcome to the Pork Academy session on positioning pork for success, meeting consumers where they are. So my name is Daniel Morris. I am from Iowa State University. I am from the field epidemiology team. So basically my PhD is focused on influenza A virus, basically focused on surveillance and diagnostics, more focused on breeding herds. I am thankful to be selected as one of the 2023 Real Pork Scholar Program from National Pork Board. Very thankful for this opportunity. And my two takeaways from this program, the Real Pork Scholar, is first, communication, how as a graduate students we can improve our communication. And second is the mentorship, when you have the opportunity of being mentoring for someone else that is the industry that is facing and can give you feedbacks and help you, guide you. It's very important. So with that, I forgot actually, so yeah, my turn. So yeah, so with that, thank you all for joining us for this morning, and we encourage you all, please take a time, scan the QR code that's in the screen, and subscribe to news from the Pork Checkoff. So I'll give you just a few seconds for that. And it's my pleasure to introduce our session moderator, Kiersten Hafer. Kiersten is the Vice President of Data and CITES and the National Pork Board, where she advised the pork industry, major packer and processors, and retail and food service operators how to win with pork and where to focus time and money. Please help me to welcome Kiersten Hafer.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for spending this time with us this morning. I would like to start off with just a reminder and the antitrust statement. If you've got any questions about the antitrust statement, please stop by our tent, which is located right outside of the VI building here to the right. I just want to remind you that we are in a competitive setting, so please don't discuss anything related to pricing or supply. If you've got any questions, as I mentioned, stop by our tent. I'd like to start with welcoming our panel, and I'm going to first introduce you to Sarah Showalter, who works as a staff member at the National Pork Board in our Insights team. And Sarah, I'd love for you to tell the team and the room here a little bit about your role.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Happy to be here today. As Kiersten mentioned, my name's Sarah Showalter. I've been on staff a little over 3 years at the National Pork Board. I'm in the Data and Insights team, and I do a lot of work behind the scenes on helping understand consumer behavior, trends, and we'll share with you today some of the segmentation work that we recently did.
Thanks. Next, I'd like to welcome Alayne Johnson, who is not only a pork producer, but a member of the National Pork Board of Directors. Alayne?
Good morning, everyone. So my name, as she said, is Alayne Johnson, and I live with my family outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, up in the northeast corner, where we have a fair-to-finish operation, and I am currently serving on your board of directors.
Thank you. And finally, I'd like to welcome Tony Manker, who is a category manager with Schnucks Markets. And Tony, if you would share a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And a little bit about Schnucks. For those of you that don't know, we're a regional grocery chain, family-owned, out of St. Louis. We have 114 stores right now, primarily through Missouri, Illinois, one in Wisconsin, and a group in Indiana as well. And I'm a category manager of fresh meat, so everything with a hoof and a tail is what I like to say. Beef, pork, lamb, veal, bison. I don't handle poultry, so very near and dear to me here. First time in Des Moines and for this event, so I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to tell you a little bit about what we're doing.
Wonderful. So we're going to kick off and talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing to really understand the consumer. It's work that we are all quite passionate about. And what you've got in terms of panel representation here is a very good understanding of how we're using this work and these tools to really advance the category. So we've done a lot in terms of investing in research and bringing those insights to the marketplace, to key stakeholders that can actually embed them in their business to drive pork demand and help us with both volume and value. So you're going to see how we're putting that into practice today through the discussions and through the panel and their experiences. We want this to be conversational. Ask questions. Let us know if what we're talking about makes sense. Certainly be prepared to participate. We're going to kick off by talking about the segmentation. So we embarked on a journey to really understand the consumer and how they were thinking about food, how they were thinking about meat, and more specifically pork, because they really are the critical component to our future success. So as we think about where we are as an industry today and how the pork category is performing versus all of the different alternatives that consumers have, we really want to make sure that pork is showing up in the most relevant way at the time that they're making those decisions. So we're going to start off with a video that really starts to set the tone for where consumers are and how they're thinking about food, how they're making those choices, and certainly how they're thinking about our product.
Pork's growth is dependent on being relevant to consumers. And to be relevant, pork must meet consumers where they're at across a range of considerations to stand out from other food options. Consumers are diverse in where, when, and how they engage with food. To understand how pork can be relevant, we talk to consumers to learn about their unique needs and how they make choices about food. But we also found consumers share a common ground, things that matter regardless of what life stage they're in, background they have, or values they hold. Our first commonality is simple yet beautiful. Food is love. People connect, share culture and heritage, and create memories with each other through food. But no matter how poetic or aspirational people are with their food, they balance their emotions alongside the realities of daily life. Across the board, people are motivated by three things: taste, balance, and convenience. When it comes to pork and taste, people instantly jump to processed cut favorites, like bacon and sausage. For fresh pork cuts, consumers strive to bring out the inherent taste and flavor with their preparation, seasonings, and recipes. For balance, people largely take an everything is okay in moderation approach to their health, but also don't realize pork's nutritional benefits, often viewing it as indulgent. The U.S. Hispanic consumer is especially concerned with the impact on health that often dictates how they perceive to safely prepare pork. Lastly, for convenience, people want good-tasting, well-balanced food that fits within the time and skill they have. While many recognize pork tastes good, they need to be educated about the cost, time, and how to prepare in order to overcome the perception that pork dishes take extra effort. Knowing the consumer means we can connect pork to what they want and need in the most relevant way to them. With the NPB Consumer Connect, we identified 7 different segments of the U.S. population, each aligned with a growth strategy. By understanding these segments' diverse motivators and considerations, we pave a path forward to meet consumers where they're at, and put pork into the consideration set when they need enjoyment, nourishment, or just something good. The future of pork starts here.
So we're going to jump in and unpack what you just saw and what that means to 2 of those consumer groups. We're going to give you line of sight into some very critical consumers that are part of our growth strategy. Before we do that, I want to speak to why we took on a project like this and why we did segmentation. in food in particular, there are a lot of brands and a lot of companies that invest in understanding their consumer to this level. And we invested in understanding the consumer before, but we've never had more data, more information, and the ability to really close the gaps in learning and understanding before today and this segmentation work. So it really positions the pork industry in a very good way moving forward. It is the future path forward for the way we're going to be making decisions, the way we're going to be funding programs, the way we're going to be tracking progress against the business, and whether or not we're actually changing perceptions among consumers. And that's what a lot of big brands do. The brands that you typically have in your home think about the consumer this way. So now we've brought the pork industry along, and we are going to be able to compete in consumer goods or in food and beverage conversations with retailers, with food service operators in a way that they're seeing in other categories. So it's a really exciting time for the pork industry, and pork checkoff dollars have funded this. And with those dollars, we're now not only determining what we do from a pork board standpoint and what we bring to market, but we're also out informing key stakeholders. So we're working with packer processors, we're working with some of our sister organizations. We're working with retailers, food service, distributors, and operators to make sure that we're creating the focus that's required to take our category to the next level and to really increase acceptance and consumption around our protein. So it's a really exciting time. We had a board meeting earlier this week. We heard the word transformational a lot through that board meeting, which Alayne will talk a little bit about. So we want to really make sure that all of us align to this shared future for who the consumer is and how pork can meet them where they are. And that's really what we're going to jump into now. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about how we got there and why it was so important that we take on segmentation.
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. So I wanted to share with you a little bit today about what we know about our consumer, what we know about where pork is being consumed, but we also wanted to understand where the population is, because for us to really grow pork, we have to fish where the fish are and drive volume and demand there. So next slide, please. So the first slide I wanted to show you is we have an understanding of where pork is being bought and where consumers live. And when we started looking at the numbers, it was pretty staggering to understand that 50% of the US population and the US pork consumption is consolidated into 10 states. When we look at that number and go up to 80%, you only add 14 states, so 24 states represent 80% of the US population and the US pork consumption. That's less than half of the states in the United States. And so as we think about also where pork is produced and where these growing trends are, there's a disconnect or a difference between those high population, low production states. And so we really wanted to dive in and understand how can we be relevant with those consumers that are in areas where they may not be involved in pork production, they may not understand where pork is coming from, they may look at pork as just a product that they can go to the shelf and purchase. So next slide. As we started diving into that, we also wanted to understand from a generation perspective, who is our core consumer? And as we know today, a lot of the consumption is driven by those older consumers, the boomers and the Gen X. We actually were able to calculate the per capita consumption, so that's how much pork these consumers are consuming on an annual basis. And you can see from the chart that's up there that the majority of the consumption is coming from those older consumers, the boomers and the Gen X. The millennials and the Gen Z are still consuming, but not as high of a level. And so as we think about the long-term health of the industry, we need to be able to be relevant with those younger consumers and have them be consuming at the same level that our core consumer, those older consumers, are consuming today. And that's really why we embarked on this project, because we know there's a huge opportunity to drive relevance with those groups, which will influence the long-term impact or long-term demand of the business.
So Sarah, could you talk a little bit about why segmentation is so critical to us really identifying and reaching these consumers?
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. So I'm going to start with an example. From a data and insights perspective, there are a lot of things that we can look at consumers. We can understand demographically who they are, and this is an example of two consumers that seemingly look like they're exactly the same person. They were both born in 1948, they're from England, they're married twice, they're successful businessmen, they're wealthy. As they think about vacation interests, they vacation in the Alps, and they also have many dogs. So they look exactly the same on paper. There is another common thread between these two. They both happen to be princes, but they couldn't be more different. So we have the Prince of Wales, who has now been promoted to King Charles, and we also have the Prince of Darkness, who is also known as Ozzy Osbourne. And so as we start to unpeel this onion and look a little bit deeper at these consumers, we understand that looking just at demographics and just at who they are and maybe what their interests are isn't deep enough to really understand what's at their core and what may drive their decisions and their attitudes and needs. As Kiersten mentioned, we embarked on this segmentation project, and we have a lot of data available to us at the National Pork Board. We really added onto that data. We built on the behavioral data, the demographic data that we already knew, but we went even deeper to really understand what are those needs and values that really drive people to make their decisions. We went out and we did additional consumer research, which I'll share with you in a minute, but that research really helped us understand there are 7 consumer segments where there are common themes on how these different groups think about food. And we wanted to take it even bigger than just pork, because pork may be really relevant to some of these groups, but the other groups, there may be an opportunity to increase relevance. So we wanted to see how are they looking at food in general, and how can we think about pork getting more into their consideration set day to day. We also know there's some really big topics, industry topics, that we wanted to have a perspective on how these groups think about. Things like nutrition, sustainability, multicultural, demand creation. And so as we were doing the segmentation work, we dove deep into those areas. So we have a toolkit that we can go out and talk to our stakeholders about, and depending on where they sit in the industry, they can decide to pull different levers on those different topics depending on which segment they're going to go after. And so really where we are today is we're going to market different. We're thinking about our consumer in a much different way. We're understanding not only who they are, but what's driving their behavior. And we're going out and we're activating and amplifying that across the industry. That's from farm to fork. And so we're providing this as a toolkit to our stakeholders that they can then lean into and utilize however they see best for their business. And then finally, this also provides an opportunity for us to measure impact. We can see how we're doing with these segments. We can understand the impact that we're having over time. And it really helps us do more precision marketing to be able to make sure that we're moving the needle in the consumer, with the consumer in the way that they want to.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'd like to take a moment to really talk about why NPB is the stakeholder to take on a project of this size and scale and make these investments, and how that's different than what we've done in the past. So Alayne, maybe you can give us a perspective from a producer and board member in how we really brought this to fruition.
Well, one of our main goals, as most of you have probably heard repeated over and over, is that our job at the National Pork Board is to build trust and add value. And one of the reasons that we're so excited about this tool is that it really gives us the opportunity to dive into the details and get a little bit more, what was the word you used? Specific, tactical, about who we are targeting and how we are targeting them, and picking those who are our easy wins, and then also identifying exactly who we need to be targeting for the added bonus of a win down the road. So as we know, I'm sure every single one of you has to make choices throughout the day on what you spend your dollars on, and we have to look at that too. And so obviously we're trying very hard to protect the demand that we already have, but really, really looking forward to emphasizing and growing our demand for consumers who maybe don't know as much about pork at this time, and understanding those ingrained beliefs that they have can really help us know what to say to them, when to say it, and how to say it.
Thank you. Sarah, could you talk a little bit about you mentioned this allows us to take into consideration some industry topics, sustainability, nutrition, as we think about the things that we can't control, where consumers are, inflation, the environment, just various things that consumers are having to navigate on a daily basis. Can you talk a little bit about how the segmentation allows us to really bring all of those things into focus?
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. So when we went out and we both asked consumers to respond to research that we conducted, but also we listened to them. And we're able to understand on those various topics, like I said, different segments react differently. So you'll see here in a minute, there's one segment that is very focused on nutrition. They are very choiceful in the choices that they make, and they're really looking into the details to have an understanding. There's other groups that may not be as conscious on their choices, and so they really don't care. They don't want to know because they just love the products that they're choosing, and they're happy with where they are. And so the insights that we have available help us really understand what levers we should pull with different groups. And it really means we're meeting consumers where they are, and we're really talking to them about the things that are most relevant to them, but also not talking about things that may not be important to them and we know isn't going to resonate with them as well.
Yeah, Sarah, I remember in one of the groups that we did, we heard directly from a consumer, and this was verbatim, "Don't tell me something that makes me question me eating bacon."
Exactly.
Right? They don't want to know too much. There is a segment that trusts us, and they just want to keep running. So as we think about what this means to our business and how it's going to change the way we think about integrating those messages and reaching the consumer and telling pork's story, maybe you can talk a little bit about those segments that we were introduced to in the video.
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. So these are our 7 segments. All of you would fit into one of these. And these are common themes on how consumers approach food more generally. And then we have understanding, as I mentioned, about how pork fits in these. But our first segment is the green, "I've got this." These are our confident meat eaters. These consumers love meat. They're confident in the kitchen. These are your grill masters. They love everything about meat. It's a staple in all of their meals. The second group is the maroon, "Stretch my dollars, tasty value seekers." This group is really driven by price. They may have a plan when they go in the grocery store, but if another option is a better price, they'll change it at the end of the day because they're really driven by value and price, and that's what drives their decisions. The blue group is up for the challenge, culinary adventures. These are your foodies. They love experimentation. They love to keep up on food trends. They're willing to try anything. They'll cook lots of different cuts. This is a group that is all about exploration. The yellow group is I make conscious choices, your mindful choice makers. This is your group that's all focused on health. They're very conscious about the choices that they make, not only looking at their nutritional value, they're also conscious on how the product was raised. They are reading labels. They're making decisions for them and their family, and they're very intentional about the decisions that they're making in the context of health. The red group is just get me through this meal. These are your simple feeders. The mantra says it well. They are get through the meal and on to the next thing of life. They don't like to cook. They're more convenience driven. They're much more likely to eat out, QSR or fast food. And so this group for food to them is just a means to an end to the next thing. The purple group is what's the alternative? These are our meat minimizers. This is a group that for one reason or another, they're actually looking to decrease meat in their diet. Meat alternatives is something that comes into play with this group. And then the final group is connections matter most. These are our culture celebrators. This is a group that really looks at food as a way to celebrate their culture, to pass on those recipes to their children, to other generations, and also to harken back to their culture and the recipes that they may have grown up with. This group also tends to be the most multicultural of our segments.
So, Sarah, we've talked a lot through the development of the segmentation in this work about how we really want to make sure that the industry can take hold of it and start to activate against it. And most segmentations stop with just identifying these consumers. Maybe you can talk through how we took it one step further with the growth strategies.
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. So as I mentioned, we've identified that our older consumers are really our core. We need to continue to drive volume and value with them. Our younger consumers are an opportunity, and we need to understand how we can get them to consume more so they look like the older consumers as we fast forward 10, 20 years from now. We overlaid these growth strategies to the segments because we found that they're not all created equal. We dove really deep into the data to understand their purchasing behavior, the cuts, the type of shopping trips that they're making, and there were four growth strategies that we identified. The first is win where we are. These are our confident meat eaters and our confident meat eaters and our tasty value seekers. These groups love pork. They drive a lot of value today. They represent 20.3% and 18.2% of the U.S. population. We need to continue to be relevant to them and continue to drive volume and value. The second growth strategy is win bigger. These are consumers that love pork, but they might just not use it as often as the other group that I just mentioned. This is our mindful choice makers and our culinary adventurers. Pork is well suited to drive additional volume and value with this group, but we just need to talk to them and tell them the benefits of pork so they consider it more day to day. The third growth strategy is incubate for growth. These are groups that still present an opportunity. They're your meat minimizers and your simple feeders, but the hill to get there is a little bit higher. And so this is something that as we think about rolling this out to stakeholders across the industry, others may choose to lean into these groups, but they're gonna have to be very specific solutions to meet their needs, such as a convenience solution for the simple feeders. And then the final one is emerging growth, and these are our culture celebrators. It's our smallest group. We also know that given the multicultural skew for this group, they're going to continue to grow and will be a larger percentage of the population. But as we look across the different areas, this is something that, as we think about emerging growth, will continue to be relevant to them, but want to win with the others as well.
So why don't we take a moment to meet the confident meat eaters. This is our core pork consumer.
Confident meat eaters like to go big with traditional proteins. They're beef and pork fans through and through, with the know-how to grill, roast, or smoke it to perfection. They're not intimidated by fresh pork, so a large hearty cut is often the center of their plate, whether it's an everyday meal or a gathering of family and friends.
You know, I'm big on smoking and big on grilling and that kind of thing, so obviously it makes me happy because I love that type of food, but when you have family and friends over and you're all sitting around the fire pit or doing whatever, and you've got something on the smoker, that's just, it's a good time for all to be had, you know.
For confident meat eaters, pork is a go-to for almost any occasion. Its flavor and affordability, as well as their comfort in preparing it, make it a day-to-day staple. Large cuts of fresh pork are a favorite for special meals when they want to wow their guests and have fun in the kitchen by making something exciting.
Oh yeah, there's just different cuts, and you could have it, you know, with ham or jamon, you know, in Spain. You just have it cheese, crackers, and wine on a Saturday day, and just sitting in the backyard or at the park, but like you mentioned, the fresh pork and having those variations. There's tons to choose from, and they're all good. You can't go wrong.
Confident meat eaters love the natural flavor and juiciness of pork, and often experiment with different flavors and techniques. They try pork with a variety of seasonings and marinades, and use multiple appliances to prepare it, like slow cookers, grills, and air fryers.
Well, I have a barbecue that makes pork beautifully in many ways. I use my oven. I use frying pans. I haven't used it yet, but I have a air fryer thing. I haven't tried that yet. I want to try that though.
For confident meat eaters, it's all about enjoying meals, and that sometimes means putting health concerns on the back burner. They're open to preparations that many consider unhealthy, like frying, but will limit processed pork intake in an effort to find balance.
For the most part, I think pork is perfectly fine. I don't remember exact details, but I do remember one of them being about pork's a clean source of protein. I think it can be leaner more healthy than beef or chicken. And I go, well, yeah, I eat it, so I think I'm perfectly fine.
Although they don't always have time to marinate and slow cook their favorites, confident meat eaters find ways to fit pork into their schedule on a regular basis. They consider fresh pork to be the most time-consuming protein, but they will keep it stocked at home so they can turn to it easily.
I always look for those sales with the baby backs and/or the St. Louis style. I'm getting several slabs and throw them together. I may not even need it. I know they had like a pork butt on sales, like a whole pork butt, and then they cut it in half. So it's a big chunk of meat, you know. I still got one in the freezer from last year. I do that more with pork than I do any other meat, quite honestly.
Pork must win where we are with I've Got This confident meat eaters, who are 20.3% of the US population and responsible for 20.2% of meat case sales in grocery and 20.9% of fresh pork sales annually. To continue to win where we are and drive pork's relevancy with this consumer, we need to keep pork top of mind, inspire these meat lovers to continue to choose pork over the other protein choices they also enjoy, deliver easy prep and taste, give confident meat eaters reassurance with cuts and preparation ideas and tips so they can indulge in their love of fresh pork without a time-consuming commitment. Expand their pork repertoire. Provide inspiration and tips and tricks with meat-forward, delicious recipes where pork is used in different ways or in a variety of dishes.
So these are our pork fans. They know us, they love us. But you heard Keith in the video say that he's still got half of a butt in the freezer. So how do we get them buying more, consuming more, getting deeper into our portfolio? Tony, I would love for you to share with the group some of the work that you're doing to help drive pork in your stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have the benefit as a retailer that I get to meet with the National Pork Board twice a year, the Pork RAC, and really focus on pork and what we've talked about today to really increase the demand. So I want to show you some real-life examples here of what we're doing at Schnucks to do that, and how we can use the segmentation that we've talked about, as well as a few other opportunities. So I want to show you some examples here, hopefully. Oh, there we go. So this is one of our ads here, obviously, for the summer. What we've been doing is featuring different recipes. Obviously, there's a price point there. We want to show value, but we want to target some of these consumers that we've been talking about. And the National Pork Board does a great job of giving us playbooks, like physical playbooks that say, this is who your customers are, this is who we can win with, and then we can leverage some of these recipes. So you see QR code there that will bring a consumer to our app and the recipe that we call out here. The pork tenderloin is a good example. We know there's opportunity in pork and in certain cuts that we know there's growth available, especially right now. Now's really the time that we can have pork shine, right? It's a value commodity. So right now, with beef being as expensive as it is, and it's going to continue to be that way, it's just a perfect alignment, really, that we can get people and our consumers to look at pork differently. Not just new recipes, but using it as an alternative for other proteins, for beef or for chicken. You know, how can we use it in recipes? So that's what we're really trying to target. Now, the customer segmentation that we've seen for pork, as a retailer, we have our own customer segmentation just to know our overall consumers, but they're not necessarily meat specific. So this kind of information that we're getting is just crucial to know who we can target and when and where. And really, it comes down to even time of the month, which I'll show you here in a little bit. So here's one example. Again, showing it too as a grilling item. Some consumers won't look at pork as grilling as much as they do other proteins. So I'll go to another example here. Spoke a little bit about multicultural earlier. So flavor-forward recipes like this jerk pork tenderloin. We have some urban stores, and pork tenderloin doesn't do that well there, and it's because sometimes they don't know either what to do with it, how to cook it, or the flavor profiles, they don't really know something that's going to resonate with them. And so this is another recipe that we've put in our ad just to get that consumer to trial, really. Once they try it, we all know pork is delicious, right? Flavor forward, it's also nutritious, and so getting them that initial step, just for trial, which is really what we're trying to target here. Some more examples of things. Again, looking kind of outside, some unique recipes that even I, being in the meat industry for a long time, hadn't thought of certain pork cuts using recipes like this that may be traditional in other proteins. Again, looking for that substitution, that alternative, so that we can create that demand and just keep driving the volume forward. Those were both during winter. So here's another summer one. So ground pork, I'm sure you guys probably heard a lot about it. Been a big focus really the last few years as that trial, that opening price point product, and it's very substitutable. So excited about this one. This actually hasn't been launched yet. This is an ad that's upcoming, so you guys are getting a little sneak peek of what we're doing. But this is a pork smash burger, right? It's on trend. You know, we're targeting that younger generation. We want people to, again, see it as an alternative where maybe they haven't thought of it that way in the past. So not only is it a value, it's a good price point, but it's timely and it's on trend. And again, these recipes come from the National Pork Board. We really utilized their resources, which is the recipes, is the nutrition that goes with it, along with a plethora of other information that really we can help utilize and drive forward pork. And then I mentioned time of the month even. So as we all know, the economy is tough times right now, and in a lot of markets, the end of the month, money's drying up, right? That wallet is getting smaller, and so we drive these value type ads at the end of the month, and pork fits well in that as well. And so here we've got the bone and assorted chops here for $2 a pound. That's a great price point, but we're also putting a recipe with it. Again, not only show it as a value, but how do I do it? How can I open this up to other people and really create some excitement around it, something that maybe they haven't seen before. With this too, these QR codes currently link to a recipe on our app that I mentioned on our website. That's a static recipe, but we've actually had conversations here while we've been here about linking to maybe videos of influencers doing the recipes, actually creating it, because we know the younger consumer really utilizes those type of platforms more than just a static recipe. So again, just trying to get some excitement around it, get the trial, because we know once someone tries it, they're going to like it and they're going to continue to buy it.
What I love about the examples that you shared, Tony, is that they are tying into what's really relevant to the consumer right now. And you've given them not only the inspiration with a recipe and a food shot that makes them want to seek out that particular item, but then you're showing them exactly what to go look for in your meat case. So do you see that consumers are responding to this?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen tremendous growth. Ground pork is a great example. We've always had a very strong in-store sausage program, so we often use all our pork trimmings and it goes into that, so we don't have just fresh raw pork, ground pork available all the time. So we partnered with a few of the packers. Smithfield is shown here, but a few others with ground pork. It's a case-ready option, so it's there and available all the time. So it's part of our standard set. And we'll get into really growing that too, because as we know, ground beef is a huge part of our case, right? And so how can we leverage that? We know the consumer is going there, so we're in the case, we're putting that product adjacent, so that again, it's part of the shopping habit. They see it, and when you can see the price point too as a value, we can get that buy over, that substitution. So yeah, the growth has been tremendous. Good question.
Wonderful.
So it's funny you say that. Not so much asking. We do get some requests. You'll see actually an example here, because we have a Just Bare ground pork as well, which is a 90% lean. So to offer those different lean points, and you can see here too, one of the call-outs we make is putting the lean point, because that's how the purchasers purchase ground beef, right, is at lean points. So we make sure to call out that lean point. And yes, having the multiple levels, that's how we're growing really that segment of pork. And we have those, and then we also have like a ground pork burger, right? And we don't have an example here, but that convenience too, and just having the availability of that in the case is really what's going to help drive. But yes, we do have consumers looking for the different lean points. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as we think about that confident meat eater, these are some great examples of how you are continuing to keep pork top of mind in the consideration, and really ensuring that you're pulling anything they've frozen or anything that they had in terms of planning their upcoming weekend or their mealtime, pork is really front and center. So thank you for all of that support. As we think about the next group that we want to dig into, this is a group where pork hasn't necessarily always been understood, and there's a lot of misconceptions. And for those of you that may have attended this session yesterday with our nutrition colleagues who are in the back of the room, you have heard the story that and the path that we're on for nutrition and really helping consumers to understand that pork is more than what they may have been taught or read or what they may be seeing in the media. So as we think about that, this group really rose to the top and really becomes a critical group for us to meet in terms of where they are and how they're thinking about their journey and what we're calling balance. That's actually one of the key insights from the work that we did. They don't think nutrition, they think balance. So let's meet these mindful choice makers.
For mindful choice makers, health guides every decision, and every decision matters. Whether they're reading a nutrition label or heading to the local farmer's market, mindful choice makers want to be in control of everything they eat. They see nutritious, high-quality, ethically sourced food as worth the price, because it's a way to care for themselves and their families.
I'm trying to get better at eating much more leaner meats, like probably more turkey for the most part. And so I've been trying to get away from pork. One of the things I want to keep in mind when I'm choosing these meats is whether if it's healthy or not. And, because I don't like grease. I don't like greasy meats.
Hispanic mindful choice makers are open to changing traditional recipes to turn them into healthier everyday dishes. But sometimes they lack ideas on how to do that using pork.
Mis papás pues hacían lo que les gustaba a ellos, ¿verdad? Ellos no se fijaban en la salud. Y pues pasan las cosas de tener alta presión o algo así. Trato de hacerlo mejor que va a ser para los niños, como la salud que me gustaría a mí, lo que me vieran, y a lo mejor los platos tradicionales no los voy a hacer como los tengo que hacer todos los días. Si es como un mole, a lo mejor no uso el pollo, uso un turkey base o de pavo, o si son como las albóndigas, a lo mejor las hago del turkey, pero a veces sí le quita el sabor.
Due to health concerns, pork isn't the go-to choice for mindful choice makers. When they do eat pork, processed options take a back seat in their meal planning, since they think fresh pork gives them more control over the healthiness of a meal. When they do choose fresh pork, they tend to opt for leaner cuts.
Pork makes a lot of things taste really good. So it's kind of hard for me to say no to it. So what I've done is say, we're not going to prepare it as much. I would say on average a month, honestly, about 3 times a month.
Mindful choice makers are skillful with flavors and techniques that make a meal satisfying without compromising on health and nutrition. They elevate their pork with seasonings and marinades and use a variety of appliances like air fryers and grills to prepare pork with health in mind.
If you get a pork chop fresh out of the shopping trips, all you gotta do is lemon it, season it, vinegar and spices, and then it just within less than 8 to 10 minutes it'll be cooked. And you either put it in an air fryer or the oven. I don't kind of like it because it dries it off. We like the pork to be soft.
Balance is the priority to mindful choice makers. And most of the time, health outweighs everything else. They limit consumption of salt, visible fat, and red meat. They choose lean cuts and cooking methods that don't add fat. And they are very disciplined in how they eat, often following specific diets.
It depends on what you read and who's writing the article. One minute you see pork as being the other white meat, and then you hear, no, it's got too much sodium, and then you hear, well, beef, if you get the leanest beef, it's good. So again, I think it's all about balance and moderation.
While mindful choice makers know how to throw together a nutritious meal in a pinch, they rely on a lot of planning and prep to keep things under control. They like the peace of mind of having frozen pork on hand.
I end up buying a big chunk because there's not many small pre-packs. Some people don't want to cook the whole thing. Some people don't want to freeze their meat. Me, I don't mind. I'll leave half in it like freezer and put date on it. But sometimes you want to do something small just for you or just for you and your loved ones. And then before you know it, somebody else come over. I'm like, oh man, I should have bought something bigger. But at least that's why you always have extra.
Pork must win bigger with I Make Conscious Choices mindful choice makers, who are 14.4% of U.S. population and responsible for 15.4% of meat case sales in grocery and 15.1% of fresh pork sales annually. To win bigger and drive pork's relevancy with this consumer, we need to win with balance. Reinforce the positive perception of pork as nutritious and high quality that makes this segment highly capturable. Convince on safety. Calm their concerns about health and foodborne illnesses with clear preparation and cooking instructions. Integrate with their planning. Help them understand how incorporating a variety of lean cuts into their routine meets their diet needs, delivers convenience, and fulfills their desire to control and plan meals in advance.
So that is the conscious consumer, right? They really need to understand much, much deeper what we are investing in, how we process our product, what they're consuming becomes very, very important to them. And you met Henry. He's consuming 3 times a month. That one incremental consumption opportunity with him gets him to eating pork once a week. And that's a huge opportunity for our industry. And knowing that's great, and there's a lot that we're doing, and Tony's going to talk in a moment about how he's putting into practice, again, some examples of how he's reaching this consumer. But before we go to you, Tony, Sarah, I would love for you to talk about specifically some of the work that you've done around cooking appliances and how cooking appliances paired with the information that we have on this consumer could create another new opportunity for pork.
Yeah, thanks, Kiersten. That was actually something that caught my eye in the ads, Tony, is connecting that dot for the consumer, because we know that a lot of times when consumers are cooking meals, one of the key decisions that they're going to have is, well, I want to throw something on the grill, I want to throw something on the air fryer. So it really can influence the way that they think about the products and the meals that they're making. A fact that we just recently saw is there's actually more air fryers in homes today than coffee makers. And it just shows the expansion that some of these products have had, especially coming out of COVID, and they're really becoming part of the mainstream and how consumers are cooking day to day. And so I think as we think about how we look at these segments, we do understand how they use different appliances, the availability of how they have them in their household, and it'll certainly be something that we lean into as a strategy to connect that dot for them, not wanting to put any more work on them, give them a solution of what the recipe is, what the appliance could be, so that they have an easy option to put a meal on the table for themselves or their family.
Thanks, Sarah. And one of the things you taught us through that work is that things like the air fryer, and we've heard that a number of times from these consumer interviews, they actually get credit for things that we aspire to get credit for. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think, as they are looking at the options that they have, air fryer is a great example. I mean, they definitely see it as a healthier option, but it also is something that gives them a quick way to provide a solution for their family. And so I think that they are taking the credit with their family, getting that meal on the table, and it definitely is a tool that they're leaning into more and more day to day. That is a huge opportunity for the industry to think about how we align with those trends.
Thank you. So Alayne, as a pork producer and board member, how do you feel about consumers and this group in particular and the questions they're asking of pork and what we've uncovered and how we're thinking about closing that gap, the work that Dr. HR, as we affectionately call her, and Emily are doing, and kind of connecting to what we've learned and putting it into practice. What are you thinking about that?
I think all of this information is just amazing. I'm just blown away by all of the the data that you all have been able to provide to really drill down to these different consumers in a way that we've never really looked at before, way beyond demographics, and specifically to the healthy choice makers, conscious choice makers. It helps us as board of directors when we are really focusing on trying to target the most important projects of the day. We would love to be able to fund all the research and do all the things, and we just quite frankly can't do that. So understanding these consumers helps us make better choices when we are making decisions on what projects to fund and who to work with. So for example, with Dr. HR, and I hope you all had a chance to be here yesterday when she was speaking about our nutrition work, it helps us to understand what those consumers in this group want to know and what we should be looking at going forward to help them know that what they're wanting and what we can provide them is the same thing. So we can't give them information that we don't have. And so this is kind of, and that really expands beyond even the nutrition category. Kiersten was talking about it a little bit earlier, but that goes, to sustainability as well. We can help understand what consumers want to know, where they're at, how we can talk to them, where they're hearing messages. And like I said, I'm blown away. I'm so excited about what this can bring to the future of pork and helping really people understand how awesome our product is. And so, of course, as a pork producer, I think pork is great. We want everyone to think pork is great. So this is a first step. I think that there's a lot of opportunity going forward, and really being able to work with people like Tony across the supply value chain is amazing. I think that's something that, we're working on all levels to help everyone really maximize their dollar and their value. And while we're maybe not all targeting the same thing, we're helping every single part of the value chain understand a pork in a different way. And I'm very, very proud of the team here and what they're working on.
And we really do appreciate the support. We have a phenomenal board and have had a lot of support and a lot of challenges to really get it right and de-risk for the larger industry. So thank you for that. So Tony, I know we've talked a lot about this conscious choice maker, a mindful choice maker. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're thinking about these consumers in your business and how to make sure that they see you as a solution and really seek your meat case out versus your competitors.
Absolutely, and I'll show you a couple examples here too of what we're doing, and I appreciate the question earlier because it's a good segue here. Nutrition is a big component of that, and so here's an example. Again, calling out a ground pork, but in this case it's a 90% lean, and it's an attributed product, as you can see there, antibiotic-free or never-ever product. So we're going after that consumer. This happens to be in January, where it's what we target, as a healthy month. Obviously, everybody's going back to the gym in January, and we want to use that time to target it and to elevate the brand and the products. Because what we see is when we do that, we get trial, and then it just elevates whatever that product is to a new level. And while it may soften as it goes throughout the year, it's higher than it was the year prior. And so we really see engagement there on things like this, especially when we make it more approachable. Part of what we heard there was not knowing, necessarily how to prepare something, or that the younger consumers don't necessarily buy, a whole pack of value pack chops or, pork butt, which we sell a ton of, but they may not know what to do with it. And so they want more approachable products. Ground pork is a good example, right? We can definitely utilize it in multiple ways, but then give an example here of what you can do with it and a recipe that comes with it. Along with what we talked about cooking methods, we do highlight all these recipes. We try to make them as simple as possible, keep the amount of ingredients low and ingredients that you should have around your house, or if not, make that list pretty small. Again, make it approachable. Using slow cookers, air fryers, we have called out both of those methods because, again, it just makes it a lot easier for the average consumer to produce. And here's another one. And really, a lot of what these do is target multiple things that we're talking about all at once. It's got the value here. I mean, buy one, get one free. It's a great price. But it also has a recipe and chili, so now it's a substitute for beef. Or, we've seen the growth in ground chicken and ground turkey why can't ground pork be part of that conversation? It hasn't been as much as we want it to be, right? And it should be. And so that's, again, just getting the consumer in the mindset of how can I use this? What can I use it for? And again, once they try it, we believe that they'll continue to buy it.
I'm going to pause you for just a second because I think for the pork producers in the room, none of us want to sell cheap pork, right, Al? So one of the things, though, that I see as the pathway forward to really adding that value to the actual pork that we buy is getting people to fall in love with it. And this is the way to do that. This is helping consumers make the easy choice, like Tony said. They're providing recipes that, oh, I already have all those other ingredients at home. All I have to do is buy this. I can do this. No big deal. So helping people understand that while they may have been apprehensive in the past because they were uncomfortable trying something new, helping give them confidence that they can do this. This is easy. It's not a big deal. So we want those prices to be higher in the future, but we've got to show them, we've got to get them to try it first, and that's a great way to start.
And we've seen the growth. So that Just Bare example, that's where we can start asking for a premium, right? We can start getting that next level. It's been a struggle. We've had multiple lines of premium pork items, whether it be heritage breeds or whatever the case is, and because of the perception of pork being a value commodity, it's hard to get that consumer to upgrade. What are they looking for? Is it a flavor question, or is it attributes that it's never given antibiotics, or what is it that the consumer is looking for that is willing to pay for that next level? And so we're continuing to try that, different items. What is it going to be? Because we want that second tier, we want that premium on it. And to your point, we're trying to create the demand so that we can ask for more. Who thought flank steaks or chicken wings, would get to the levels they are now, right? But it's because everybody gets behind it, and creates that demand, and then we can start getting those premiums.
So, very good points made in what you just shared and in your comments, Alayne. What I think is really interesting, and I'd like to come back to, is the example that you gave in terms of Just Bare and promoting health and that higher lean ratio. I heard you say, start the year strong. It trailed off, but it was at a higher base throughout the remainder of the year. So as we think about you driving trial and as we think about getting the consumer back to repeat, a percentage of them did, but you actually grew your base sales, which is great because then that allows you then to kind of serve the consumer in a way that gets them in and gets them loyal to the product and to you. And then we get to those additional price value discussions. And I think that's a great example and a real world example. We talk about that in rooms, we talk about that in the playbooks, and we evaluate that as some of the work that we launch into the marketplace. But now you're hearing from a retailer, like it's working. That's really exciting.
And bottom line, as pork producers, we want our product to be able to sell in the grocery store.
Yeah.
So we need them to make a margin as well. So it's a collaboration, and using this information to be able to do that is really incredible.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of the work that is culminating in this segmentation in a way for us to really engage consumers in a different way, especially those younger generations. So we shared with you 2 segments, the confident meat eaters, which tend to be our core pork consumer. We have to protect and defend, make sure they still consider pork and consume pork. And then we've got these mindful choice makers, which tend to be younger consumers that we may have to engage a little bit differently with, and we're showing how we're starting to put that into practice. One thing we didn't really talk about with that group is the fact that we have some African American consumers that really tend to be in that group that are trying to manage some of those decisions around nutrition and health, and they're managing to chronic disease or to preventative measures in the way that they're thinking about fulfilling their mealtime needs. And that's some work that we've had in market over the last 2 years, led by Jose. And what we're finding is there's opportunity for us to position pork a little differently. So we know that they are very engaged on the process side. And as soon as we did this segmentation, we understood the gap that we had to get them from processed over to fresh. So Jose has been leading this work where we've really helped them understand that they don't have to give up the flavor of pork and sacrifice, but there is probably a better way to prepare it. So we really got to the crux of, it's not the product that's the issue, it's the way they prepare it. And there was a lot of fried recipes and smothered recipes and high caloric recipes. So we really worked to make some healthy swaps and to start bringing those forward. And I would encourage you all to visit the website, soulfulpork.com. You can see some examples of how we've taken some of those traditional dishes and kind of upgraded them and made them a little bit more approachable and accessible for younger generations and also from a nutrition standpoint. So that's an example of what we've been doing and what we're going to continue to dig in and lean deeper into based on the segments that we've identified so that we can deliver the right message and the right content to these consumers and then support retailers with those assets and those learnings so that you guys can find your growth faster. So with that, we want to make sure that we allow for some time for questions and some interaction from all of you. And we want to make sure that we're hearing from you. So give us feedback. Let us know how this work might be impacting you or how you're thinking about your business. Help us think about how you're working in your business to improve volume and value. Make sure that you stop by our tent outside and take the quiz. I see a lot of stickers on name tags. So a lot of you have taken the quiz and you know which segment you fit into. It really helps to internalize this and understand, if you take that quiz, what the drivers are and how we're segmenting these consumers to understand how to really talk with them and engage them now and into the future for pork. So I would encourage you all to stop by. It's a 2-second stop and you'll get a sticker and you'll know exactly who you are and where you fit. And I want to make sure also that you don't leave before scanning this QR code, because we want to make sure that we keep you posted on the progress that we're making, some of the results that we're seeing, and how we continue to partner to bring pork to the next level within the industry. So make sure that you're signed up to get all of our communications. With that, we're happy to take any questions, and I'd like to thank again our panel for the time and the expertise and sharing all of this with our producers. So I'll be happy to kick off any questions. We've got a microphone right here. She's coming to you.
I'm just wondering if any other commodities have done a segmentation study like this in the past or currently doing, and how it relates back to what you guys have found.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Pam. So there's a lot of associations or boards that have done work like this. Think avocados, almonds. They've invested to really understand the consumer. And we find that in a lot of categories that are mature categories. So it's categories that they had a strong foothold with consumers, but those consumers have aged out and they really haven't redefined themselves. So we're finding those boards have made similar investments to not only understand who they are, but then actually invest in some consumer campaigns to communicate with them. So we are following that same process, right? So we've invested in the information, and about a month ago, our board of directors approved an investment for us to actually develop a consumer campaign that will support pork at a very high level and allow for all of the brands and products, whether it's a retailer brand or a packer processor brand, to also nest under it that will advance the industry and the category. So I would say those are two good examples. Dairy's done a lot as well in terms of investing in really understanding these consumers. So we are now right on the heels of some of the work that they're doing, and it's an exciting time. I don't know if you want to share anything else.
Yeah, I would just say that this data will really allow that marketing campaign to be really, really targeted. And so for those who have experience in that world, I mean, the social sciences are very challenging, right? And a lot of times you're really dealing with emotions to move the needle on any sort of thought process. And so by using this data, we are really hopeful that because we have data that's never been available to us before, partly because our world has changed. I mean, we all see that in our everyday lives. Though that's the biggest change in what we know about our consumer now. And because we have that data, we can really utilize it to more directly target them and not waste time and airspace on people who don't want to hear from us or don't need to hear from us.
Hey, Kiersten, let me chime in a little bit too real quick just to elaborate. Because I have multiple proteins on my desk, right? So what I'll say is, while there may be some information out there, what's provided here by the National Pork Board, I mean, it literally is a playbook, and it's specific for Schnucks, and they did even deeper dive in what's our particular consumers look like, and what's our breakout of customer segmentation, because we're very different than the national average, so the regional players, it makes a difference, where you are in the country. And so yeah, I applaud you guys for putting it together, because it does make it actionable. It's not this overarching, just, oh, this is great data. This is actionable. It's very specific to us, and we know how to take it forward. And you do see the segmentation a lot, I think, more on the center store side of the store. The big CPG companies, they do a lot of that. On the fresh side, I think you guys are doing a good job kind of leading that way. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you connect with Sabor USA? Do you connect with them? Sabor USA.
We have in the past. I would say that right now we've been really focused on pork specifically. So now we're actually going back to, now that we've got our table set, if you will, we're going to think about bringing in some other conversations and partnerships to advance our agenda and our vision for where pork can go. So I would say you'll see more of that in the future in terms of how we're partnering and kind of sharing some of our results.
This is fantastic. We've been in the meat industry for 20 years. We're based here in Iowa. We have 2 meat processing plants. We're in all segments. The only thing we don't sell is the squeal. That's what I tell people. But we do sell everything, and we do it on an international basis and domestic as well. So we see a lot of consumption of pork, and everybody's wanting to say, okay, what's the per capita consumption? That's valuable. The only thing is that I don't see this information. It's not visual for me that I see this on a regular basis. So this has been very valuable. I love the progress that you've made at Schnucks. I'm familiar with who they are. I'm curious to see if it ever goes to, hey, we're going to make 90% sirloin pork. We're going to make, cushion meat. People don't even probably know what cushion meat is. So there's so many cuts that could add value. And the more I get to have a meeting with the National Pork Board or the producers, or when I travel with them on an international level, it's always, how can we add value? But there's so many cuts. There really is so many cuts that are out there, like a bone-in picnic. We don't use that here, but Puerto Rico does. So there's so many. That's why I want to say that connection with like Sabor is valuable, right?
Yeah, I appreciate your comments. And, we don't have here today our international partner, right? So when you think about the board, we have an international team and a domestic team. We all roll under market growth. So we're really thinking about, on a daily basis, how do we create the most value for every cut? How are we thinking about carcass utilization? So we take into consideration the work we're doing with folks like USMEF and our export business, and then we think about what's happening in food service, and then we think about retail and demand. And our goal is really to drive the value no matter where it's sold and how it's sold. And quite honestly, we're doing really well in export right now, and pork does really well. We had to really take some time to clean up domestic and make sure that we had a strong foundation as we start to move to that next generation. Because a lot of the heritage that we've got and the loyalty, right, That's changing. So we've now got to redefine and understand how to drive that relevance and how to get them to understand a lot more of our portfolio, because they're really on the edges. So I think that's all really very good points, and that's how we're thinking about our portfolio and how we're thinking about even transforming some of those conversations. So we're still talking and thinking cut first as an industry, but you saw in Tony's examples, we're not leading necessarily with cut, we're leading with a burger or a soup. You're kind of transitioning to leading with what the finished final product could be, and then giving them the cue of what to go look for in your case, which is interesting, and it's a bit of a shift. So that might help us get to using some of those other meat cuts and blocks, right, where a consumer may not really know what to do with a bone-in picnic.
And Kiersten, and what I didn't show is a lot of those are recipes for maybe items people aren't familiar with. So in St. Louis, we're the pork steak capital of the world. And so we sell a lot of that. So I didn't show that, but the tonnage behind that is incredible. I mean, summer holidays, we send 15 truckloads of pork butts to our stores that we go through, because over the years, and we've been in business for 85 years, we've grown that business on the pork steak, and it's become more than just a St. Louis thing. We've grown it outside regional because we play in other states, but now throughout Illinois and even Rockford, close to Chicago, the pork steak is picking up because we show it and feature it so often that we're getting that trial and then the acceptance. But it takes time. It does.
And one of the other things that your comments brought to mind is, we have a traditional grocer up here. There's a lot of volume that happens in specialty retail. So we're trying to figure out, how do we reach everyone, and how do we make sure that we are positioning our portfolio appropriately everywhere? And a lot of your examples are really so that you guys can compete against where people are making choices to shop, whether it's a specialty store or a mass retailer or a value retailer. We're kind of all working together, and I really appreciate your comments about the fact that we took the segmentation and applied it to your business to help you understand how you were trending with these consumer groups, and that'll inform how you make decisions, because that's the reality. That gets us then to not only the consumer, but identifying the cuts that can really play a critical role and doing some regional execution around that if necessary. Any other questions?
Yeah, please. Thank you. In one of your segments relies a lot on fast food chains because, they just need to go through the meal, as you said. Do you find that there's an opportunity for ground pork to increase substantially in this segment? Do you think that the NPB is going to invest on this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We believe there is an opportunity for ground pork in total, for sure, and you see a lot of examples that Tony shared. That is a wedge product. It's a point of entry product for younger consumers. They like it. It's easy. It's approachable. It's available. So we're seeing them really flock to retail for that. There is absolutely opportunity in food service, but I think we need to ensure that we're thinking beyond just a pork burger. We've got some food service operators that are actually featuring pork burgers today, and that tends to be a question that we get a lot when we're out talking about ground pork, but we're really focused on ground pork as an ingredient in food service.
But I was saying because they will do the marketing for you. Then if it gets to the fast food chains.
Yeah, fast food, they do the marketing for you, yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of work being done by our market growth team in those channels to think about how and where and when to position those products. So yeah, that work continues, but it's a lot harder. It's a longer term proposition to get it in as an everyday menu item. So we'll do a lot with limited time offers where we'll try to build some demand for it and get some interest in it, and really breed confidence by the operator to then make it a full-time menu item. But it takes a long time to do. Any other questions? I know we're tight on time. We may have questions. Time for one more.
Maybe the last one. Well, I'm Asian American, Chinese especially. Last week I was in Chinatown at the cooked meat sections. Okay, barbecue is all pork and chicken, no beef. All right. Okay, so one of the good question here. Chinese people like pork more than beef. Okay, partly because it's reachable price-wise, and once you season it, it tastes really, really good. All right. And when I go to a supermarket, I hardly see any stir-fry cut, okay, which is not very common because most of people want to a big chunk and they want to cut that in themselves. Yeah. But with the convenience, okay, nowadays people want to be fast and don't want to cut their fingers. That's very important. So if they have a balance of cut and tenderize it, because and also reduce the fat. The difference between pork and beef and other meat is pork is very obvious. Okay, when you have fat shows up once you put it in the refrigerators, people scare. Okay, so we have to figure out how to reduce that, but still make it very tenderized without the fat. All right, so those are my little things here.
I appreciate that feedback, and you're right. We have to make it a little bit easier. We don't see a lot of strips or stir fries or diced, so that's an opportunity, certainly moving forward, to meet a lot of those segments, because even if they like cooking, there are times they want convenient. So to that point, we're having a lot of those conversations and thinking about how to take some of that responsibility off of the consumer and maybe make it part of how we present our product to the consumer. So appreciate those comments. Well, thank you everyone for your time today and for taking this journey with us to understand our consumer.